Good morning, YouTube. It's been over a year since I purchased my Ferrari 458, so I thought it was time to write my 458 buyer's guide, which is available right now to purchase on my website, normalguysupercar.com. We're going to talk about a lot of the topics covered in the book, so some of it will be redundant, but I wanted to show you some of the things in video. So yes, this will be the ultimate 458 buyer's guide.
Activities.
If you're new to the channel, my name is Dan, this is my garage, and this channel is all about the supercar ownership experience, buying and selling them, maintaining them, DIY work on them, and even things like a buyer's guide. And of course, with us today is my dog, Mo. What are you doing, buddy? You looking for treats? Oh, is that the deal? I need to go hide some treats for you? Well, alright. If you didn't know, I already produced a 430 buyer's guide, so that is available on my website, normalguysupercar.com/shop. Basically, it covers a lot of the topics of things that you need to look out for when buying one, some advice and maintenance things. And the goal of these guys is to make you more comfortable when you're buying one of these cars, so that hopefully it becomes a good experience, you get the right car, and ultimately enjoy it. Okay, so a bit of history on the 458. It was first produced in 2010 and it went all the way until 2015. There are, of course, a few different versions of it. The primary one is the Italia, which is the coupe, and of course the Spider, which is a hardtop convertible. This was Ferrari's first mid-engine V8 convertible with a hardtop. They're using the same F136 block that was in the F430. However, it was stroked or bored out to 4.5 liters. The horsepower was bumped up to 560 horsepower and about 398 foot-pounds of torque. The red line was also bumped up to 9,000 RPMs, and this was also a direct injection engine. Unfortunately, with the 458 came the demise of the manual transmission. So the manual transmission was no longer available as an option. You could only get the 7-speed Getrag dual clutch transmission in this car. Don't chew that. Don't. That's not food. Why you always gotta find non-food? I'm gonna hide a couple treats from Mo. We'll see if he can find them. No peeking. You stay there. We'll hide one right there. I had a hard time with things that were elevated, so we're gonna try that. There. Search and destroy. Oh, he smelled it. He smells it, but he doesn't know where it is. Oh. Oh, I figured it out. So there are some rumors that apparently the first few years, like the 2010s and 2011s, were susceptible to some sort of transmission issue. Supposedly, there's a sensor that can fail in transmission and cause it to basically not function anymore, and you have to replace the entire transmission. I can't confirm that. There seems to be some people who have had transmission issues on the car, although I don't know that it's 100% related to the year. So I do think that there may have been a few issues with the very first few cars, but this wasn't the first time that they had been using the Getrag transmission. Oh, we already found the second one. So they actually had been using a dual clutch transmission into California for a while. So it wasn't like they just threw it in the 458 and said, here's a brand new transmission, good luck. It also is in a Mercedes SLS, so this isn't exactly a unique transmission to this car. It is actually a pretty strong and good transmission. Now, a lot of people that beat the hell out of these cars probably have grenaded some of these transmissions. I mean, if you're going to the drag strip constantly, using launch control every time you go, doing burnouts and donuts, yeah, you're basically abusing that transmission. So I'm not going to be surprised if it blows up. However, I've been pretty hard in this car. I've tracked it a lot. I've driven it hard. We've been all over the country. I've had no problems with it. So I don't think that it's totally a valid problem. I do think you should be a little bit skeptical if you hear a lot of transmission noise or if it misbehaves, but otherwise, I think the transmission is pretty solid. So all the 458s did come with the carbon ceramic brakes, and of course, this is another one of those things that people get all worried about. They're like, oh my God, I heard these are like $20,000 to replace. Okay, yes, that's true. The rotor is extremely expensive. The brake pads are actually about the same as the regular brake pads, maybe a little bit more expensive. The rotors last a very, very long time, and the pads actually last a long time too. The rotors are capable of lasting well over 100,000 miles if you're using it with like normal driving, but if you're beating the hell out of the car going to the track all the time, yes, they can actually wear down faster, but it's not typical. If you notice right here, it says the minimum thickness right here is 35.5 millimeters. So I want to show you how to check the depth of the rotor and make sure it's still in good condition. So if you're inspecting one of these 458s to purchase and you're unsure about the rotor depth, buy one of these rotor calipers. All you have to do is turn it on, place it onto the rotor. So as you can see, these are at 36.03 millimeters, so we still have at least a half a millimeter. And the thing is, this carbon ceramic is extremely hard, so it's not going to wear very fast. This car has over 33,000 miles on it, and these are still in really good condition, so I am not worried about replacing these anytime soon at all. As you may know, Ferrari has a reputation of having kind of crappy paint on these cars. One thing to do is really go over the paint, check it out, make sure that there's no paint chips if you're looking for perfection. Look for swirl marks and those sorts of things. It's pretty much guaranteed that if there's no PPF on the car, you're going to see swirl marks and you're going to see paint chips. It just happens, unfortunately, when you drive these cars. So paint chips are pretty easy to spot. Unfortunately, all of mine have just been taken care of, so I can't really show you what they look like. If it flakes through to the primer, it'll show up as a white dot or white speck. Normally, you would want to check for swirl marks. However, since my car was just paint corrected, there pretty much are none on the car. But the way you do that is you would look at the car at a really steep angle with very bright lights. Focus on where the light is on the paint, and then kind of move that line across the surface of the paint, and you'll be able to see marks go across the light. So I would suggest bringing a flashlight for sure when you're checking out the paint. And if you can, get the car out in the sunlight. That's actually the best source for looking at swirl marks. It's also a very good idea to bring a paint meter if you can. We're only going to be able to check a few panels on this car because the rest of the car is covered in a PPF right now. So by using a tool like this paint meter, we can just simply push it on the car and see, hey, we've got about 8 mils of thickness. You want to check it in various spots, make sure it's pretty consistent. 7.2, 8.0. This may be a little bit on the thicker side, but it appears that that's probably the original paint. However, we know for certain that this panel back here was repainted because, well, I had it repainted. So you can see, yeah, this one's clearly been repainted. So this is what you want to look for. It's not a big deal if it's been repainted if they did a good job. So as you can see here, the colors match almost perfectly. It's very hard to distinguish that there's any difference. And so that's what you want to be looking for. In fact, they probably did a slightly better job than the factory because there is a lot of orange peel in the factory on these Ferraris. So this panel also has not been PPF'd yet. And you can see we're at 8. This is obviously the factory paint. This is obviously not. The base price of the 458 was $225,000 or so in the US. By the time they stopped producing it in 2015, the base price had risen all the way up to about $240,000. Most of these cars were optioned into the upper 200s and low 300s. For example, this car was $298,000 brand new. It is pretty highly optioned with a lot of carbon fiber. Some of these options have a substantial impact on the value of the car, and some have almost no impact at all. In fact, carbon fiber is one of those that tends to not have as much impact as you would think. It's an extremely expensive option from the factory, but people don't really care about it as much on the secondary market. Now, I'm not sure exactly why, but the only one that seems to have some impact on the price is the interior. And I think that's because the interior is very hard to replace versus the exterior. For example, the canards on this can be replaced pretty easily. Same with the engine base. So I think a lot of people do put aftermarket carbon fiber once they buy these cars, and so it's not actually the factory carbon fiber to begin with. So let's talk about some of the options on this car that do have an impact and don't have an impact on the value of it. As you can see, this has the electronic folding mirrors. This option basically has zero impact on the value of this car whatsoever. No one really cares about it. This car also has the optional steering wheel shift lights. A lot of people really want that option, but it doesn't seem to have much effect on price. However, I do think it helps with the resale of the car as far as desirability. It's a good option to look for, but it's not really all that big of a deal. As you can see, we've got the carbon fiber panels, we've got carbon fiber driver zone, as they call it, the carbon fiber interior. So there's carbon fiber everywhere. It pretty much has almost no impact on the value of the car, and it really doesn't matter on the desirability. It may help seal a sale, but people aren't going to be specifically looking for that as a thing to buy. This car is equipped with the axle lifter, so if you push this button, the car will raise up by about 1.5 inches or 2 inches. That is a very desirable and an option that does increase the value of this car. So that option right there is one of those that people do want and are willing to pay for. This car is also equipped with the front and rear parking sensors. Again, an option that is desirable but probably doesn't affect the price that much. However, it does have the reverse camera. Now, this is an option that is desirable and will increase the value of the car because people want it so bad and because reversing these cars is so hard. We've also got the Daytona seats, which is a pretty common option. So these are not the default seats. It is an option to get the the Daytona seats. I don't know if these really change the value of the car. If you do have the carbon seats, those might increase the value of the car by a little bit. They are certainly a little bit more valuable and more expensive from the factory. Some people may not actually like the carbon seats because they are a bit more racy and they're not quite as comfortable. As you can see, the engine bay has the full carbon fiber option, so it's got carbon everywhere. I don't think that this actually has much of an impact on the value of the car. It is an extremely expensive option from the factory, but people aren't necessarily looking out for the carbon fiber package, especially in the engine bay, because you can add these very easily on the secondary market. In fact, for much cheaper than they would have cost initially. Because this car has the axle lifter, it was required to have the headlights that move. I don't know exactly what it's called, like the adjustable headlights or whatever. Mine are actually non-functional, and basically no one really cares about that option. So it has zero impact on the value of the car. And while we're up front, you can also see here are the aftermarket carbon fiber front canards I put on. Again, these will have no impact on the value of the car whatsoever. Certainly one of the things that's going to impact the value of the car tremendously is the color options. The classic Rosso Corsa is probably one of the most desired Ferrari colors ever. In fact, that's why they call it resale red. Some of the colors are very rare and therefore cost a lot, and some of them don't help the price at all. And some of it depends. So a great example is Rosso Corsa, in this case with the red interior, probably hurt the value of my car. So I don't think as many people want the red seats like this. They're more interested in the Rosso Corsa with tan or the Rosso Corsa with black, the narrow seats. That's a very common color combination and people really want that. So those carry a good resale. However, if you look on the market right now, any of the cars that are white, it's very interesting. So if it's white with tan or white with black interior, it's almost like those are the worst priced cars in the market. You see those at the bottom of the pricing. However, if it's white with red, those will be at sometimes the upper end of the market. I think right now that is extremely desirable, and therefore those cars are carrying a huge premium. Another example is the Rosso Dino. So Richard's car has that kind of orangish color. It was extremely rare, and now it's kind of in vogue. So people are really wanting that color, and it's carrying a pretty hefty premium. Basically, you have to determine what color you want and see if you're willing to pay that much for that kind of color, and also factor in how rare that color is and how hard it's going to be to find. So if you have a very specific color combination, you might be looking for quite a while, or you may have to pay a lot more because the one time it does come on the market, it just simply is marked up a lot. Well, you found all the treats, Mo. Are you happy? You just kind of chill now, It's like, hey, I want more food, but there's none available. There have been at least 3 recalls on the 458. Initially, the first few cars off the production line had a wheel arch issue where they used some sort of glue on the arch that could actually catch fire when it got too hot. Those probably have all been taken care of, I hope. The second one was that actually in 2012, I think, or 2013, somewhere around there, some of the engines were built wrong and actually seized up. It only affected a couple hundred cars. I'm assuming that all of those have been taken care of because of the severity of that recall. And of course, there is the passenger airbag recall that is currently open. Actually, my car is still affected by that. I need to take it in to get that serviced. Basically, if you're getting one of these cars, make sure any of the recalls has been taken care of, or that you're aware of the recalls and can take care of them yourself. This guide is not as focused on issues that go wrong with the car because, frankly, there just aren't that many and they're not severe. So all the things that do go wrong with the car are pretty easy to remedy and aren't that expensive. The F430 had a lot of interesting, weird maintenance things, like it had taillights that would rattle apart, the side view mirrors would shake loose, the motor mounts would go bad after a certain amount of time. So all those things were really common. In fact, they pretty much were guaranteed across the board. There are some things that do happen with this car, and we'll go over a few of those, but I'm not going to cover them all. If you want to see all of them, obviously go buy my book, or you can buy my consultation services. So again, go visit normalguysupercar.com and check out the consultation services. Hi, Mo. You don't need to help me. Yeah. No help. So unfortunately, the 458 is still susceptible to the stupid sticky buttons issues. All these buttons have a soft touch coating that in hot climates seems to kind of turn to like a sticky goo. I've taken care of the vast majority of these buttons. Strangely enough, is even on things like the steering wheel cover. So this right here actually can get sticky too. It's also on the binnacle cover. So this right here can get sticky. So you can see that this button right here still has the soft touch. I had to replace this button because it actually broke. This is what they're supposed to look like from the factory. You can see it has a soft gray kind of color, and it has a very soft tactile feel to it. This button is the factory button, which I've removed all the soft touch coating. You can see it has kind of a plastic glossy touch to it. So it's a little bit different. And then you can see this panel right here is starting to get just the slightest bit sticky. It's not full-blown sticky. I can feel it kind of grab my finger just a little bit, but nothing's coming off my finger. It's not making my finger dirty. Once they get really bad, just touching it will actually make it look nasty on your finger. You want to look out for sticky buttons. Again, that is something that goes wrong with these cars. Ferrari also seems to have not figured out the whole leather stretching issue. I think part of it is they use a foam that degrades, again, under higher heat and humidity conditions. So you can see the dashboard in mine is in pretty good shape, but the front of the dashboard, way up there, you can see some ripples right there in the center of the screen. So those actually need to be taken care of. It is starting to come off from the glue. Also, the headliner in these cars is prone to fall down, just like in the 430 and pretty much every other Ferrari. When you get in these cars, make sure to touch the ceiling and press on it and make sure that it's held in place very well. So it should not actually move at all. It should be very firm when you press up against it, and check the entire panel. The 458 is set up with a lot of toe-in and negative camber from the factories. Tires do not wear evenly on this car. They actually tend to wear a little bit on the inside more than the outside. You're going to want to check the tires, make sure that they do have enough tread left, and also check on the year. Some of these cars may have sat around so long that they still are sitting on the factory tires, and at this point in time, all of them should have had the tires replaced by now. They're all at least 5 years old. I wouldn't trust the tires if they're more than 5 years old, so if they are, make sure that you factor it into the cost or get them to be replaced. And also make sure that they're good name brand tires. I don't trust some of these off-brand tires. Make sure they're Michelin's, make sure that they're Pirelli, something along those lines. Oh, we're getting bored. I know, yeah. You're such a good boy. Oh, you're a good boy. Unlike a lot of the predecessors to this car, the exhaust in this doesn't actually have any known problems. So you don't have to worry about the headers cracking, don't have to worry about the muffler separating. None of those things seem to affect this car. So exhaust, they finally got figured out. The headers in this car are actually really good, so you don't even necessarily have to worry about them being replaced. However, a lot of people do like to change out the exhaust in these cars because of the sound. The stock sound of it is actually a very baritone, deep sound, and a lot of people want that F1 high-pitched shriek or shrill sound. If you do want that sound, you're going to need an aftermarket exhaust. It's entirely possible that you're looking at a car that already has an aftermarket exhaust, or it may even just have the valves pulled. So factory valves on this car do keep it fairly quiet and tame sounding until the valves open, so a lot of people would pull the vacuum line on those valves and make them open. If you do want that high-pitched shrill sound, you're going to need an X-pipe in this car, something like the S-Line exhaust. It's a very good system and fairly affordable. Just make sure you understand what you're getting before you buy the car and that that's the sound you want, and if not, factor it into the cost of what you're willing to spend on this thing, because these exhausts can be very expensive. The initial version of this car had a different tune than the later versions. So somewhere around 2012 or 2013, they supposedly changed the tune and got rid of some of the burble. So some people actually prefer the 2010, 2011 tune opposed to the 2012, 2013, 2014. I'm not exactly sure when they changed it because I've driven a 2012 and it had tons of burbles. Somewhere around that time, I may have been mid-production in the 2012 years, maybe somewhere in 2013. I'm not sure exactly. If you want that burble and you want that kind of crackly sound, you can tune it back in if you have one of the later cars. So that's not something to worry about. You can get a tune. It's not a big deal. So one piece of advice I'm going to give you is beware of the ultra low mile cars that have sat around and just kind of rot. If it is a low mile car, you're going to want to be extra careful to make sure that it's tested out right, that it drives well and things are working correctly. The longer these cars sit, the more likely they are to have some problems. And also, any of the problems that were produced from the factory may not have been resolved yet because it hasn't been driven enough. So some of these problems that may have occurred because of a manufacturing defect or whatever, they tend to come to a head and be discovered within the first few thousand miles. If you find a car that's only got 1,000 or 2,000 miles or even 3,000 miles, I'd be a little bit cautious versus a car that has maybe closer to 10,000 miles. I think that's kind of the sweet spot, 10 to 20,000 miles. Even 30,000 miles, I'd be pretty comfortable buying these cars with no problem at all. The more the cars get driven, the more they're probably going to be reliable, and the more likely you are to get a better deal because of the depreciation. So as of this moment, there's a couple hundred cars on the market. There's somewhere around 300 to 400, and the average price seems to be around $175,000. So the 458s have been depreciating, but I think they finally have stopped and maybe even are starting to go up just the slightest bit. The 430 stopped depreciating, and also the 360 stopped depreciating, and even started appreciating. So I think that's going to put some pressure on the 458 market to kind of hold or even go up up over the next year or two. So I think this could be bottom of the market, or at least very close to it. Right now, the bottom dollar price seems to be in the $130 to $140 range, with, like I said, most of these being around $175,000. The upper range tending to be in the low 200s. 225 seems to be kind of at the upper end, depending on options and desirability. You will see sometimes these cars in the 250s, 260s, even 275 range. Those are usually immaculate or super rare condition cars. I don't know if that's something you're interested in. I think those are a bit out of the price range. I wouldn't pay for anything over about $225. The Spider kind of does add about $15,000 to $20,000 typically, sometimes even as much as $30,000. So those are obviously more desirable and have a considerably higher price point than the Italia.
Hi. Oh, you're just ready for a nap now. Okay.
Hopefully you found this information helpful, and if you want some more information, you can buy my buyer's guide on my website. Go to bit.ly/NGS458. It should take you directly to my 458 buyer's guide. It's also going to be available on Amazon as a Kindle book or as an actual paperback if you want a physical book. I know some of you prefer that. You can download the PDF on my website. It's $9.99, so it's not exactly expensive, and it is pretty helpful. And again, if that isn't enough and you still want more help, you can buy my consultation services. So go to my website, normalguysupercar.com/shop, and go check out the consultation services, and we'll see if I can help you out. Don't forget, any of you that sign up on my email list or buy any of my merch or become a member of this channel are automatically entered to win any of my contests coming up. Go do one of those 3 things. Get yourself some cool free stuff. We got some more stuff given away. We've got a ton of car stuff coming your way, so you're going to want to stay tuned. It's going to be sweet.